Bet David had a debate on Jubilee. You guys know about these Jubilee debates where he debated anti-capitalist. So it's one capitalist versus anti-capitalist. And there's a couple of things that he said here that I do want to debunk, and I have some data to show you. The first person that he speaks to, they're talking about incentive is the engine of capitalism. And if you remove it, you're going to have issues. Well, I think those of us, and we'll get into it, but some of us are living proof that that is not the case. And I'll get into all of that. So let's get into the first person that he debates here. Check this out.
Hi.
How are you? What's your name?
Zena.
Zena.
Awesome. So this claim about incentive is one that we see often promoted by capitalism enjoyers, right? Mm-hmm. And it's this idea that, profit incentives is the only thing that can make humans do things, get up out of bed every day, which has never been the case. Historically, it's not the case. Psychologically.
Historically, it's never been the case?
No.
What has been the case?
So we've seen...
What's been the incentive?
The incentive is intrinsic motivation.
Intrinsic motivation?
Of course. Have you ever heard of intrinsic motivation?
Of course I have. So you think people are going to go just do anything for no incentives?
The incentive is intrinsic, meaning passion, interest, and honing your skills.
Whether you get paid or not.
Well, the problem is that we're forcing people to, need to, work to survive.
So what's the alternative? So give me another solution, another economic.
Pause. So we're going to go ahead and pause there. Notice that Patrick said whether they get paid or not. And I just want to give a couple of examples. Let's go with the people who are not paid. If we only did things because of financial gain, then we wouldn't have volunteers. We wouldn't have mutual aid. These are easy examples to point to. I do mutual aid. My comrades at RBN do mutual aid. We got that concept from the Black Panthers. That's where it comes from. The free breakfast program at schools, that came from the Black Panthers. Now, for those of us who are doing mutual aid, we're not paid to do that. There's no financial incentive. So people wonder, well, then why do you do it? We do it because we're passionate about helping people. You can say the same thing about people who are volunteers. What about people who volunteer for things like Habitat Humanity, people who volunteer to build homes for people who have volunteered to help children? There's a place here called Cradles to Crayons and things like that, where they gather supplies and donate to kids that are in need. Again, you're not paid as a volunteer. It's something that you do because you're passionate about it. That's what she's talking about when she says it's passion that drives people. Now let's get to the money, because I do want to give another example here. I want you to think about professions that people are a part of that pay very little. Let's start with teachers. Teachers, look, if you want to be rich, don't go into teaching. Hey, I come from the education field, and I'm here to tell you, if you're trying to make money, honey, don't go into teaching, because it ain't there. And you're going to do more than just teach. A lot of people don't realize this. Teachers aren't just standing up in front of a classroom teaching their students. Teachers are teachers. Sometimes they're babysitters. Oh, I've seen it all. Sometimes they're even counselors. Believe it or not, there are times when things happen with their students. A lot of times, some of the students, instead of going to talk to their parents, they'll go to their teacher. I've seen it. Talk about babysitting. Sometimes when kids' parents don't show up to pick them up after school, who's there watching the student? The teacher. And sometimes, teachers have to be moderators. I've watched teachers break up fights. So that's a profession that doesn't pay much. People become teachers because they are passionate about teaching. That's what she's talking about. There's other things that we can point out, other jobs that people do that, even like people who are like bartenders. Some people really love bartending. Some people really love waiting tables. Like they love doing that. So I think for Patrick Bet David, it seems like with him, like that's what he does. He has to be motivated financially to do something. And we know this because he just interviewed a war criminal and kissed his ass the entire time he was on the show on PPD podcast. That was Benjamin Netanyahu. We know that Patrick Bet-David has shown us that he's willing to do what he wants to do or what he can do for money. Don't forget he had a pyramid scheme. Before this whole PBD podcast really took off, Patrick Bet-David had a pyramid scheme. So he was exploiting people. The pyramid schemes, like Avon, what's another one? Amway, this whole idea that you have this pyramid and you're supposed to recruit other people to sell underneath you, and then they recruit people to sell underneath them. And what's supposed to happen is all of this is supposed to trickle down to you, but it doesn't. I know a number of people that have participated in, whether it's been Avon, Amway. Listen, I know or people they bought into it too. All I got to do is get other people under me and then I'll be making more money and and all this kind of stuff. But the people at the top, the ones who making all the money. And that was Patrick Bet-David. So that's him. Now, are there some people who are only driven by financial incentive? Yes. And he's one of them. But there are also people who are not driven by that way. And I think we need to look around the US, and next time you go into, I don't know, a store or a restaurant, or next time you see a teacher, look at some of the people who are really passionate about what they do and they do not receive a high salary. Let's continue on.
Finish the talking point?
Yeah, actually,
right,
I'm
awesome.
curious.
So yeah, the psychological theory of self-determination is widely accepted in psychology and basically explains that intrinsic motivation and passion is actually what predicts incentive. You're arguing that incentive is integral to profit-driven motivation. That's not true. Extrinsic motivation, all times, at every single case, is going to predict less creativity, less motivation, less skill, etc. Intrinsic motivation is what causes things like technological development. Some of the greatest breakthroughs have been from people who are devoted in honing their skill.
So should they get paid for it?
I think that we shouldn't live in a system that privately owns the means of production and forces people in this position.
What college did you go to?
USC.
You went to USC. What did you major in?
Sociology.
Sociology. Who's your hero as a professor? Who's the professor you look up to?
This doesn't seem like a topic that's related to capitalism.
Question? The reason why I asked this question is because somebody convinced you of that. Somebody convinced you that is the way that
psychology and studies convinced me of this fact about the human mind.
If someone convinced her of that, isn't it fair to say that someone could have convinced Patrick Bet-David of his position? I also thought it was kind of weird that he referred to her professor as a hero. Why? Like, who's your hero? Hey, I think all of us had like a favorite teacher or a professor here or there. I did too, but I didn't see them as a hero. Very strange.
Fortunately, to your claim, results show that the greatest
economical
system
that intrinsic motivation predicts more creativity
that allows
and more
people to go above and beyond
anything
and
like
solve every
motivation.
single issue out there. An entrepreneur who gets up, who says,
"What was your claim again, Mister?"
I'm going to incentive.
Incentive. What about incentive?
Who has an incentive to go out there and build their lives, and you put
so
no
I'm saying that this
incentive
that you're talking about,
yeah.
What predicts the best incentive, the best drive, and the best creativity?
So what do you think about
has
Elon
been proven
Musk?
by psychology.
What do you think about Elon Musk?
Can we respond to my claim?
This is about incentive.
All right, awesome. So you're arguing that incentive is intrinsic and tied to extrinsic motivation. What we find is that the best incentive comes from intrinsic motivation.
So a person that's passionate about solving an issue is going to build something bigger than somebody else that's not.
Yeah, so someone who has a true passion for this.
Yeah, so
exactly. So profit motivation is not the thing that's driving innovation, right?
Of course
psychology.
Of course,
so psychology proves that that's not the case.
If there's not,
that profit's not the reason that we have the greatest inventions that we do today.
I don't know if I disagree with the fact that there's a passion behind it. Are you saying people with passion, even if there wasn't the incentive to make as much money as they would make, people would still pursue it even with or without money?
That's what psychology says.
Well, your claims are wrong because
that's not true.
Whoever your psychology professor is, if you look at data and you find out how America, that's only been around for 249 years, schooled all the other countries that have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Because they stole resources from those countries. So what are we really going there, Patrick? So here's the thing, folks. How many of you, if you were given the opportunity to have a job, to hold a job that you're passionate about, and you didn't have to worry about the income, you didn't have to worry about your salary, how many of you would do it? You see, this is the problem, Patrick, because here's the thing. Most people would rather do something they are passionate about if they had the opportunity to do so. You can look at people who, artists is another example of this, because artists a lot of times don't make much. That's why they call them struggling artists. Like, the point is, a lot of times people end up doing jobs that they may not necessarily be passionate about because they're trying to pay their bills, whether it's keeping a roof over your head, whether it's rent, maybe feeding your kids, etc., student loan debt, whatever it is. I know a number of people that majored in one thing in undergrad, but didn't end up going into that field because they couldn't, because they had all these student loans they had to pay off. But I think a lot of us, we had the opportunity to do so. We would rather pursue something that we're passionate about. Now, that brings up the capitalism issue, because the reality is, the reason why people end up in those situations where they have to take jobs that they don't like just because they have to pay the bills is because of capitalism, which is increasingly getting worse in this country. We have a homelessness crisis in this country that has only increased over the years. It's not decreasing. Tent cities used to just be a California thing. Now they're everywhere. So I don't see how this capitalism is really helping a lot of people. You'll see that when we get to the second person, he talks about people getting out of poverty. But that's a big part of it. A lot of people would rather do something that they're passionate about. Let's continue on here.
They
did better than others because the incentive,
because they accumulated profit, right, to 1% of the population and continue to produce on that
not
basis.
Necessarily. It's
right?
not,
we have this. Okay,
it's
so
not necessarily.
Do we want to respond, because you can say that
you've been interrupting the entire time. So if you're saying about the 1% are the problem and they're the only ones that make money.
That's
a lot of people make money. You said profit goes to the 1%.
I'm explaining how it is that America has become the dominant power that it is now, right? What we see is that because we have this engine, right, this desire to accumulate profit, we morally justify things like going to other countries, imperializing them, colonizing them, extracting their resources, right, to funnel our country, right? Social democracies in the Nordic countries don't do this. So yeah, they might not be the wealthiest power, but they have higher rates of education, literacy, human satisfaction, etc. Right. So it depends on what we actually value in a society.
And they're happier people. That's why countries like Finland and Iceland, this is why they keep getting ranked as the happiest country, because their needs are met. When your needs are met, you're more likely to be happier. It's just a reality, So this is really important. So he doesn't believe that a lot of it's going to the top 1%. It is going to the top 1%. Look at any company, look at how much the staff is being paid, and then look at what the CEO makes. Look at these things. I'll give you an example. When I worked at Boston University, the president of BU at that time, this was pre-pandemic, at that time was making $2 million a year. Why? It's not even a top 10 school, but he was paid $2 million a year. What do you think the staff was making? I'll go ahead and tell you, I wasn't making much. A lot of people don't realize that unless you're like a dean, a lot of us weren't making much. And I was the academic advisor, but the president making $2 million. You got people in these positions at these universities. This is an example because this is where I came from. In these universities that have master's degrees, had to get a master's degree just to get the position that they have at the school. And they're making maybe $50,000 a year in Boston, which is nothing here. But the president of the university is making $2 million. And he lives in a house that the university pays for. So he don't have no rent. Make it make sense. Make it make sense.
Behavior.
Do we value well-being or do we value profit accumulation?
Validates your point. If that's the case, people would move to those states. They don't. When you judge a great restaurant by the amount of people that come in, you can say the food sucks here.
Yeah,
you can say the service sucks here.
There were millions of people that lived in Germany.
But everybody's lined up to want to come here. They're not lined up to go into those countries. They're just used by professors as theories.
There were millions of people that also lived in Germany in the 1920s.
I lived in Germany before as well for 2 years.
It's also not easy to get citizenship in those countries too. Especially like Switzerland is probably the hardest one I've heard of. It's not that easy to just say, I'm going to move to Finland. It's not as easy as you think. So, there's that. Plus, a lot of times people come here because they want to try to achieve the American dream, which I would say is not really a thing anymore. But these are the stories that they are told about the United States. Let's get to the second part here. I do want to get to this part about poverty. And this is something that I know quite a bit about.
My next claim is capitalism has lifted more people out of poverty than any other system.
Patrick.
How are you?
I'm Gabby.
Gabby?
Yeah.
Good to meet you.
So I would argue that governments have actually lifted the most people out of poverty. If you look historically, we look at China, for instance, had the most significant poverty reduction in all of human history. They pulled 800 million people out of poverty using state-owned enterprises and state centralized planning. They did work with the capitalist system, but they did it, most of it was done through state-funded infrastructure, education, and contributing to strong literacy programs, redistributing the wealth. I think that my other argument would be that there hasn't been an opportunity for alternative systems like socialism to pull enough people out of poverty. So we look at examples.
There hasn't been?
There hasn't been enough opportunities for them to succeed. And so when
Why
we
do you
say,
think that is?
I think that is partly because of the US, and I think because capitalist forces and global market insecurities have sabotaged these attempts to do socialism. So we look at an example in Chile in the 1960s, they elected a democratic socialist, and he proposed literacy reform, wealth redistribution, land reform, and all of that was a threat, obviously, to the United States because McCarthyism was on the rise at the time. And so instead of allowing Allende to have a chance with that, the U.S. Orchestrated a CIA-backed coup to take over and to have a military dictatorship that led the country instead of Allende, who actually was having a lot of success in reducing the poverty rates before the U.S. interfered. And so I think we look at other parts of Latin America, like Venezuela, for instance, and we see the same thing. We see that the U.S. has interfered several times. With Chavez in Venezuela, he was able to reduce the poverty reduction in half in the first decade of him being in office. And he was sabotaged ultimately by the US and by a military dictatorship. So the
Pause. I see someone did their homework. Someone did their homework, right? So check the fact check over here. It says poverty decreased under Chavez from 62% in 2003 to 32% in 2011. But today, under the system he created and the leadership of handpicked successor, Venezuela's poverty rate is more than 90%. Due to inflation that once hit 300,000%, most citizens can't afford a proper meal. You know what that fact check omits there? The sanctions on Venezuela from the United States. That's not listed there as well. That is going to have an impact, right? Okay, let me let her continue here.
The people that replaced them were actually.
So may I respond? It's
Sure.
a lot of different cases here. So thank you for that.
Of course.
Let's go China first. Okay, so when you say China was able to recover and because they use state-funded, nationalized systems. So in 1978, Xiaoping, the leader of China, went to Japan. He saw what was going on with Japan for 2 decades. Every year, their GDP was growing by 15%. The economy was doubling pretty much every 4 years. Sure. They go over there, they say, we got to find a way to compete with Japan. How do they have fewer people, but they're beating us? They sit down with their leaders after a few drinks. Eventually, they say, how did you fix your economy to be growing the way that it is? A capitalistic society that they had in Japan. They asked the question from Xiaoping, the Prime Minister Fukuda, asked the question, how many banks do you guys have in China? He says, we have one bank. He said, it's a nationalized bank? He says, yeah. That's it? Yeah. How many loan officers do you have? Not many. You want to compete with one bank? Yes. He says, if you want to compete with us or others, here's what you have to do. You need 5,000 banks with 35 branches, with 30 loan officers. That's a total of 5.25 million loan officers and a population of 600 million people that are living there. You do that every week. You take 10 applications with these loan officers for small business owners, and you allow the small business owner to compete. They did that. China started competing. By the way, in America in the 1920s, we had around 30,000 banks when we were really, competing in a marketplace. In the 80s, we ended up having around 14,000. Today, we only have.
I think he's missing the point, right? Notice where his focus is. His focus is on the money, on the banks. So here's something I want to mention. The point that she's trying to make is that they don't have the homelessness crisis that we do because they pretty much guarantee housing for their people. We don't. This is why you don't see a lot of homeless people in China. It's just like, and honestly, if you go to other countries, you'll realize this as well. This is why you don't see as many homeless people. So there's that. Now, China isn't perfect, but the point is, if capitalism is working out so great for the United States of America, why is our homelessness rate increasing and not decreasing? Why? I'll tell you why. One of the reasons why it's increasing. Speaking of these banks that he likes to talk about, one of the things that we've allowed to happen in this country, we have allowed private equity to buy single family homes. We've allowed them to enter the housing market. And that's a big part of the price increase. That's part of it, is the private equity. Don't forget about BlackRock. Don't forget about the '08 housing crisis. So again, how has that really helped and improved? If that's the case, we should be on the up and up. We shouldn't be tanking. You shouldn't have people in their 30s with 4 roommates. It should be the exact opposite. It should be, you look back at talk to people who grew up during the 60s or the 70s, et cetera, where people were able to work a factory job and own a single family home. What happened to that? What happened to, during that time, families were able to have one parent work and another parent was able to stay in the household and watch the children. So they didn't have to pay for daycare. What happened to that? If capitalism's working out so great in the US, what happened to that? Why is it that all of my friends and myself and everyone that I know, why is it that all of us have to have a 2-income household? Someone explain this to me. Why? Why do you have people in their 40s living in shoeboxes if capitalism is working out so great? Look at home ownership in this country. Look at what is happening. Why is it that Gen Z people can't buy homes? If it's working out so great, it's not. And I'll let him finish, and I'm going to show you the data on the poverty, which he doesn't bring up.
4,100 banks in America. That concept of allowing just one bank to compete, it's not going to work. China takes on the idea from Japan.
If I can interrupt you, I mean, I think that
they start growing with certain capitalistic philosophies.
Thinking about this in very capitalist terms, which makes sense. You're a capitalist, but
because it works, that's the idea. Because it's produced the results.
You're only thinking about these scenarios in a situation where market mechanisms are in place, and this is the problem that I have with so many capitalists: is they can't exit their worldview and try to see a world where socialism could be in place because they don't understand the untapped potential of socialism. And I'm a democratic socialist. I think that we need to build forward towards that with reforms, and I think we need to work with the government. I don't think that we should abandon the state. I also don't think that we should give state elites the complete control over society. I do think that we should work with the state to instill these reforms and then eventually erode capitalism.
But unfortunately, socialism has had hundreds of years
in terms of
to produce results, and it hasn't worked. Do you know why it doesn't work, though?
It's been sabotaged.
It's been sabotaged, or it's because it forces people to do something they don't want to do?
Pause. I think now we're talking about 2 different things. There's democratic socialism and there's socialism. So for a lot of the democratic socialists, when they're talking about democratic socialism, they're referring to like what countries like in Europe have. Like they're talking about like a Norway, a Denmark, like, you know, that style of democratic socialism, right? And he's saying that it doesn't work, but apparently it does. If you look it up, guys, if you look at the happiest countries in the world, we're not one of them. Surprise. It's countries where people have their needs met. It's Iceland. It's Finland. I never went to Finland. I lived in Europe for quite a while, actually, but I never went to Finland. But there's a reason why. When you have your needs met, obviously, it's going to be easier for you to be happy. That's just a reality. Now, we can go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I talked about this in an article recently, actually earlier this year, where I talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So one of those things is your health. We don't even have healthcare for everybody in this country. It's kind of a need, according to Maslow. I mean, decided this a long time ago. Food, clothing, shelter. We have a poverty rate among children in this country. Remember when they said we cut child poverty in half? I was like, we shouldn't have child poverty at all. If capitalism is working out so great, we shouldn't have it. Why do we? We shouldn't have children going hungry in this country, but we do. Do you know, when I worked in education, you know, some kids, the only time they eat is when they get that free meal at school. These are the things people don't want to talk about. I said shelter, but we got all these homeless people on the street. We got people constantly being evicted. We have gentrification where people are priced out of their neighborhoods, again, because you allowed the banks and the investors and private equity, you allowed this capitalism to take hold. And that's how we get there.
Does capitalism not do the same?
No, capitalism gives
there's
you
7 million people in this country who have to work multiple jobs just to get by.
I have to work multiple jobs for a season.
They're forced to do that because either they do that or they starve. So if the options are to work or to starve, that's not freedom, that's economic coercion.
Respectfully, if you do that for a period of your life, I understand it. If you're doing that for 30 years, you're doing something wrong. You shouldn't be working multiple jobs for the rest of your life.
So first of all, I'm not going to argue with this moral argument. I think that people who live in poverty, especially when we look at how many people live in poverty in this country, and also it depends on how you define the poverty line, but there's 40 million Americans who live below the poverty line in this country. There's 3 guys in this country that own 40% of the wealth. How does that work in a country that is
You really want to go there? You want to go there? Okay, so let's talk about it. So when we talk about the rich people at the top, okay, and you say, well, the rich don't pay enough taxes. Do you know what the bottom 50% of taxpayers in America pay towards the revenue that the government gets in taxes? Do you know what the bottom 50% pays?
Tell me.
2% of taxes. Do you know what
they should, because they make less. What is your argument here, Patrick?
1% pays.
There's been several years.
Do you know what the top 1%? Do you know?
Been nothing.
No, hang on a second. This is from the IRS. I'm not writing a blog from Huffington Post. This is not Daily Beast. I'm telling you the story. The top 1% pays 42%
I'll say this. The top 1% is about to pay a lot less. And
they should pay more than that. Remember, this is just the money. Let me tell you something that Patrick's not telling you. That's just the money that's reported. That doesn't include a lot of these rich people, especially the billionaires. Like I told you, they have offshore accounts. They know how to hide money when they want to so that they can fit at a certain part in that tax bracket. That's just the money that's reported. So he's saying this as if they shouldn't pay that. If you make more, you should pay more. Well, what is the issue here?
Taxes because of the provision that just went into Trump's your guys' big beautiful bill.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right. So let's look at some data, because he's saying these things, but I want to show you what the data shows. Check this out. National Poverty in America Awareness, right? So this came out this year in January. Check this out. Everybody pay attention to this. In 2023, the official poverty rate fell 0.4 percentage points to 11.1%. There were 36.8 million people in poverty in 2023, not statistically different from 2022. Why in the hell, if capitalism is working out so great in the United States, why do we have 36.8 million people living in poverty in this country? So those other countries that they're mentioning, China does not have that. Why do we have so many people living in poverty if it's working out so well? Now I want you to see who those people are. Between 2022 and 2023, the official poverty rate decreased for white and non-Hispanic white individuals. Women, 18 to 64-year-olds, unrelated individuals, all workers, less than full-time, year-round workers, and those with some college. Check this out. See, this is what I wanted you to see. The only group to experience a statistically significant increase in their official poverty rate was the 2 or more races population. You see that? So now that shows you who is in poverty. Let's go on a little bit more. I want to show you another statistic here. See, again, if capitalism is working out so great, why is our poverty rate so high? Why? The numbers are here right for you. Look at this. This is ridiculous. So we scroll down here. I think there's one more part here I wanted to mention. Or are we going to the next one? Oh, this one. Check this out. I want to show you this. Transitions into and out of poverty in the United States. I want us to look at key findings. This part here is very important. Increased time spent in poverty is associated with lower chances the individual will exit poverty, which ranges from 56% after 1 year poor to 13% for those in poverty for 7 or more years. In other words, the longer you are poor, the harder it is for you to exit poverty. Now, I know it's cliche to say that poverty is a cycle, but it's true. You know, a lot of times they like to tell you about the people who grew up poor and they made their way out. Those people are outliers. Oprah Winfrey is an outlier. LeBron James is an outlier. So we always got to remember that. It is hard to get out of poverty if you are born into it. The longer you're in it, the harder it's going to be. It also says here, a 3% increase in the regional unemployment rate, which is roughly the magnitude experienced at the beginning of a recession, reduces the exit rate from poverty by approximately 6% per year and raises the annual rate of re-entry into poverty by 9%. So when we have recessions, it makes it even more difficult for you to get out of poverty. Also, apparently, can make it so that some people return to poverty. This is what I mean when I say a lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck. All it takes sometimes is one incident to really screw you over, whether your car breaks down or a medical issue that you got to pay out of pocket for because we live in a country that doesn't give everybody health care. It's things like this. The other part here, the decline of approximately $100 in the 20th percentile of individual real weekly wages between the early 1970s and the mid 1990s is estimated to have reduced the annual exit rate from poverty by 15%. Wages did not adjust for inflation over the years. So he doesn't tell you that. And for the person who mentioned the social programs, there's something else that he does not tell you. Check this out. So they mentioned the other countries. Let's talk about the myths here. Americans who are poor are worse off than elsewhere. The myth is that the poor in the US are not so bad off, can be found in a wide range of places. It basically reflects the idea that those in poverty have nothing to complain about, that given the conditions in less developed countries, things could be worse. It is certainly true that if we compare the US to countries in sub-Saharan Africa, make this bigger, sorry. Physical poverty in the US is obviously less extreme. The US did not have the widespread famine and severe stunting of children that is sometimes found in extremely poor countries. However, most analysts would argue that the more relevant comparison would be the group of other high economy countries, such as those found in the EU, Canada, Japan, Australia, and so on. So how does the US compare to other countries? So we're going to debunk what Patrick Bet-David is saying. Look at this chart. We are looking at the extent of poverty across 26 OECD countries. So the United States is at the bottom here, and for a reason. If you look at the poverty rate overall, Iceland has 5.4. Remember, that's one of the most happy countries. Denmark 5.5, Finland 6.3. These are more of the happier countries. But if you look at the United States, our poverty rate overall, we are at 17.8. You see the difference between us and those other countries where people have their basic needs met. Now let's look at children. This is a very telling part here. The children in Iceland, 5.8%, Denmark, 2.9%, Finland, 3.6%. Again, the happy people. And if you scroll down to the United States, when you're talking about children, 20.9. So If capitalism is working out so well in the United States, why do we have a higher rate of poverty than when you compare us to these other countries? Whether it's the children, whether it's overall, why? And social programs. Eric, if we can go on this sheet, if we can do control. Oh, okay, there we go. I want to show you something else. I think it was this one. Aha. Something else he doesn't show you. Check this out. Supplemental poverty measure. Check this out. Social Security continues to be the largest anti-poverty program, moving 27.6 million individuals out of supplemental poverty measure in 2023. Patrick Bet-David doesn't tell you this. That's a big deal. 27.6 million individuals based on Social Security alone. That's the part that people don't want to face. Now, Patrick will come up with this story. Oh, I came to the US and I worked hard and I did a good, and that's how I got to where I am. Well, there's a lot of people that work hard in this country and they still don't get out of poverty because people like you exploited them, Patrick. People like you got to where you are because you exploited the people who worked for you with your pyramid scheme. So this is something that the US, if they wanted to fix it, they could fix it. And that's why, notice, you don't really hear a lot of times candidates talk about this. They always say we got to enrich the middle class. We have to build a strong middle class. You don't hear them say anything about poor people. They don't mention them. They don't mention working poor and they don't mention poor. Why? Because those are not the people that they're trying to help. They've kind of just written them off as a lost cause. Let's just kind of give them a little bit to keep them where they are. And then we'll just, go from there. But we're not really going to give them enough so that they can get out of that situation. The money makers at the top, the 0.01%, the gatekeepers at the top want to remain at the top. And they don't really want to let anybody else up in that club. That's just the reality, because that's less money for them. And you would think that people who are billionaires that have billions and billions of dollars, that they would eventually say, well, I don't need all this money. No. They're greedy. And it's never enough. So again, I asked that question, Patrick Bet-David, if capitalism is working out so well in the United States, why is our poverty rate as high as it is? Why is our child poverty rate as high as it is? Why is our homelessness rate increasing if it's working out so well? Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.